Morning, everybody. Well, how does it feel to be in the last few days of Christmas? We're going to start it with a little video, and then I'll explain what I mean by that comment.
I wish it was Christmas, Christmas every day. We could just let it snow forever and live on holiday. There would be presents every morning, under every tree. Oh, Santa Claus, if I could have my way. I wish it was Christmas every day. School is out, no work today, so in my PJs I will stay, staring at this winter wonderland. Reindeer slippers on my feet, a Christmas vacation on TV. I feel like I am just a kid again. I can see the Christmas lights appear. Welcome to the best time of the year. I wish it was Christmas, Christmas every day. We could just let it snow forever and live on holiday. There would be presents every morning, under every tree. Oh, Santa Claus, if I could have my way. I wish it was Christmas every day. Kissing under mistletoe, 52 weeks in a row. Now you got me shouting out with glee. No more wars and no more fights. Peace on earth comes every night. What a wonderful world this could be. I can see the Christmas lights appear. Welcome to the best time of the year. Yeah! I wish it was Christmas, Christmas every day. We could just let it snow forever and live on holiday. There would be presents every morning, under every tree. Oh, Santa Claus, if I could have my way. I wish it was Christmas every day. Christmas every day. I wish it was Christmas, Christmas every day. We could just let it snow forever and live on holiday. There would be presents every morning, under every tree. Oh, Santa Claus, if I could have my way. I wish it was Christmas. I wish it was Christmas. Oh, I wish it was Christmas every day.
So, merry last few days of Christmas. Actually, tomorrow, historically, is the last day of Christmas. It ends with Epiphany, right? The traditional time when Christians believed that the Magi came and visited Jesus and had this epiphany of who this child was. So, you can say it one more day. But the line from that song, which I want to highlight, is, "No more wars, no more fights. Peace on earth comes every night. What a wonderful world this could be. I can see the Christmas lights appear. Welcome to the best time of the year." So we're talking about peace today. You know, Epiphany, like I said, is the last day of Christmas, January 6th this year. And, you know, it's historically it's been called, the 12 days of Christmas. Ends with Epiphany. And it's not about a partridge in a pear tree. I know that it's a pretty popular thing this time of year, maybe about a month ago, where these chain emails go out or posts on Facebook talking about the subversive nature of the 12 days of Christmas and how it highlights different parts of Christian theology. Those are cute, but they're not actually true. There's been some pretty good research done on that talks about how there's very little to do with that song in any kind of what would have been Catholic catechism or discipleship of the time when the song was written, that it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But the first time it appeared, if you're curious, is appeared in 1780 in a children's book called Mirth Without Mischief. And a first edition of that book sold just a couple of years ago at auction for over $23,000. But you can also buy it for free on Amazon. Fun fact, the 12 Days of Christmas song, if you were to buy all the gifts in that song, that would run you, ready for this, $38,993.53, or a 95% increase since PNC, the group that did this, started recording it in 1984. That's inflation. Anyway, that's all random. Epiphany, the traditional time in Christian theology where the Magi, like I said, brought gifts to Jesus. So the epiphany of who this child is, right? If we know the story, the Magi decided to go home in a different way. Since after they saw Jesus, they had this epiphany because they knew that King Herod had evil plans. And so once they had this epiphany of who this child was, it changed the way that they went home. It changed the direction. That's why it's an important part in how we celebrate in the Christian calendar every year, this idea of once you see this person, this Jesus, it causes a change. Where I work at IJM Canada, every year we get together in a group and pick an epiphany word from a hat. It's part of our yearly kind of spiritual practice. And we use this epiphany word to guide our year. So it could be hope, it could be joy, it could be peace or patience, perseverance, or other things. And the question is, how can this word that you pick out of a hat, in light of who Jesus is, this epiphany, guide you through the joys and challenges of the year? So when you have, for my work context, when you have a difficult meeting or a particularly hard story comes across my desk, how can the epiphany word that is supposed to guide my year help me to process that? So the main idea I want to get across this morning, I'm going to say it several times, is may your epiphany this year be that you are a peacemaker, which means for all of us that we are a child of God, which means that incarnation applies to us because we can be bringers of peace every day. So let's look at the theme verse for this series, Isaiah 9:6. I'm going to read it in the Message this time. For a child has been born for us, the gift of a son for us. He'll take over the running of the world. His names will be Amazing Counselor, Strong God, Eternal Father, Prince of Wholeness, or Peace. His ruling authority will grow, and there will be no limits to the wholeness he brings. So right away, as soon as the series started, and I saw the theme verse, it made me think of the Sermon on the Mount, especially that little bit about being a peacemaker. Let's look at that, Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And I'm going to read it again just in the Message. It says, you're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of competing or fighting. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. Seems like a pretty important theme, just reading those couple of verses together. This idea of peace. And the word that's used, translated there, is shalom, especially in the Old Testament. Right, so this idea of wholeness. And these words stand at contrast to another holiday tradition, New Year's resolutions. So here's a top 10 New Year's resolutions identified by Google. Number 1, exercise more. This is based off of people's search, what they search for in terms of New Year's resolutions. Number 1, exercise more. Number 2, lose weight. Number 3, get organized. Learn a new skill or a hobby. Live life to the fullest. Save money or spend less money. Quit smoking. Spend more time with family and friends. Travel more. And read more. Those are the top 10 most popular New Year's resolutions. And, setting a goal, obviously, is not a bad thing. But according to the the Journal of Clinical Psychology, that 46% of New Year's resolutions, to some degree, kind of a self-identified degree, have some kind of positive outcome or a sense of accomplishment or some kind of finishing. And so that's a really vague way of asking a question, but B, a really kind of low return on what the goal was supposed to be in the first place, right? Less than half by some measure. And like I said, setting this goal is not a bad thing, but I want to propose something this morning. Maybe the reason why resolutions fail so often is because they require us to change something about ourselves. Maybe this year, instead of resolution, let's think of epiphany. How can having a daily epiphany guide your year and change how you think and approach each day? Not change who you are, but be reminded of who you already are. So again, may your epiphany be that you are a peacemaker, which means who you actually are is a child of God, and incarnation applies to you because you can be a bringer of peace every day. It's not about changing some part of yourself that's not good enough. It's about accepting who you are, a child of God, and that means that when you're living out of your true essence, you are a peacemaker. I am a peacemaker. It's like opening a gift every day, like the song said. The gift is the knowledge of who you actually are, who you can be, a peacemaker or a child of God. So, what does that mean for us today? What's the application? Let's start by understanding the nature of peace. I want to read a quote from a book here. It's called Life on the Vine, written by a guy named Philip Kennison. He's got a great first name, so obviously he's pretty smart. It's a book that I was a required reading for a missions class in my master's degree, and as I was reading it a couple of days ago, getting ready, I told Robin, I was like, man, I really wish I would have paid attention to this book more when I was reading it the first time. It's really good. Anyway, so the character of peace. Scripture speaks of peace in more encompassing and far richer ways than our common understanding of peace. We tend to define peace primarily in negative terms, as the cessation or absence of conflict. But the concept of peace that pervades Scripture has more positive resonances. Indeed, we would be less likely to mute these resonances if we were to substitute the word peace, the word wholeness, or even salvation. Listen to the prophet Isaiah, who by means of Hebrew parallelism, tough word, aligns peace and salvation. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who announces peace, who brings good news, who announces salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. The Hebrew concept of peace, or shalom, informs both the Old and the New Testament, refers to the state of well-being, wholeness, and harmony that infuses all of one's relationships. Such a view of peace is inherently social. To be at peace only with oneself is not to experience shalom in its fullness. Perhaps this is why Scripture rarely speaks of peace as a purely mental state, as serenity or peace of mind. Peace is not something confined within one's psyche. Instead, peace is a way of life. In this regard, Scripture more than once speaks to the way of peace. It means we get to live our lives as children of God, as bringers of peace into the world, So let's look at a couple examples. Social media. That's a peaceful place. How do you pursue peace when you see a post that gets you excited or angry? Is there a better way than a knee-jerk comment? Remembering that peace is a communal activity, not a satisfaction of internal feeling or peace of mind. Politics, that's another peaceful arena. When we talk to people who vote in a way that we don't, for whatever reason, is there a better way than just simply referring to the talking points of said political party that you've chosen? Because those talking points are designed to cause division. Friends at work, in school, in what way can we serve the God of peace, perhaps being a place of peace for those around us, a refuge where safety and peace is the norm? See, pursuing wholeness, or shalom, peace with our families, neighbors, colleagues, strangers, the point is community. Shalom is a community-based word. It's not a personal word. And before I expand on that, I just want to touch on rights. Rights is, in our society, in a democratic society, is like the holy grail of things that we hold dear. My rights matter. Shalom stands at stark contrast to the notion of personal rights. It is impossible to cultivate peace when we are fighting or screaming for our own rights. Think about it. If you can think of any kind of large-scale argument or conflict, typically, if you want to have like the ultimate trump card, that term needs to change, the ultimate trump card, and you could say, well, it's my rights, right? That's how you shut down an argument, right? Because it's all about, well, this is who I am. This is important to me. I'm defining it based on my individual right to exist. Well, if that's how we approach every single argument, nobody actually ever wins, A. And B, it just feeds more conflict because you're not actually trying to find peace. You're just trying to put a stake in the ground and say, I'm right. We can see that all the time in all kinds of massive arguments that we see, but peacemakers, as we are supposed to be children of God. So perhaps a better way can be found through empathy instead of rights. Strive to understand rather than be understood. Our actions make it obvious that we're children of God. Pursuing peace is extremely obvious, especially in our cultural context, where individualism is the kind of modus operandi of how people expect everybody to act. If my individualism is more important than my faith, then I'm not a peacemaker. But if my faith is more important than my individualism, then I have a chance of being a peacemaker. See, the decision to pursue peace sounds really easy and fun. It actually requires a great deal of sacrifice and intention. You see, it requires us to think critically about how we behave. Is the way I'm behaving based on my individual rights or the way that I feel I should be treated? Or is it based on something that God is telling me to do? Is my faith a personal experience? Or is it a community reality? Is my faith simply about a personal relationship with God? Or is it about the way that God is telling me to live? Is shalom the point of this whole Christian religion? Going beyond a personal relationship. So I guess my question is, are we ready for this sacrifice or this level of intention this year? As Christmas wraps up and we have our epiphany of who this child is, who this God is, does it cause us to change direction? Does it cause us to leave our individual priorities on the side in order to pursue peace and community? May your epiphany be that we are peacemakers, which means that we are actually children of God, and incarnation applies to us, because we can be bringers of peace every day if we leave individualism behind. I want to close by reading a bit from James, chapter 3, verse 16 through 18. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. You know, what's interesting, as I was doing some research for this talk, one of the things that came up again and again and again throughout Scripture is that the words peace and righteousness are inexplicably linked. Almost every single time you see an explanation around peace or shalom, you also see an expectation or an outflowing of righteousness. That when the people of God pursue peace, the natural order of things is that righteousness follows. And sometimes I think that when we have our individualism as the priority as opposed to the community, we think that righteousness is the first ingredient and that peace should follow that. And somehow there's this weird mix-up that we get into of thinking that moralism or saying the right thing or passing the right law or having the right expectation that society should think a certain way and be righteous will lead to peace. Where in reality, I think that the Scripture tells us again and again and again that if we start with peace, we have a community of peace, that righteousness is a natural outflow of that. And it doesn't require fighting. It doesn't require people to bow to our will. It doesn't require any of that. It just, all God is asking us is to be his children and to live in peace.